Hello, FewCandy here, and welcome back to planetzoo, the beginner's guide Let's Play build series. And today we are finally coming on to the big subject of transportation. So we're going to be looking at everything you need to know about transportation in this episode today, along with building out an American bison habitat, which is kind of sculpted here already. More on that to come. But just before we dive in, I do want to talk about one little path technique, which I probably gave you the harder way round to do this earlier on in the series. So we're going to talk about how to get a path from one level to another in a nice smooth transition very quickly. So I have terraformed out this platform, which is where our central plaza is going to go with one of our train stations up here, which is why I've done this in this episode. We're going to have a nice restaurant overlooking the lake, an education centre, probably a reptile house up here as well. So it's going to be quite a key little feature for us. But this path, in order to get it up this slope nicely, let's make sure we've got angle snap on, it can be a bit tricky. So you'll place your path down, you'll come up to this, and I mentioned before about using terrain stamp tool to get a nice smooth slope. So one other thing you can do is if you come up to an edge like this and you can't build over it, okay, that's fine. Let's just undo that small segment. We'll go into terrain. We're going to just smooth this out. And this is a little bit of it's a much quicker way round, and it will give you really nice, flat and smooth path transitions, which is great. Okay, so now we can. So let's get up onto the top of our slope and we'll do a couple more path pieces up there for now. And this looks absolutely goddamn awful. So we're going to delete out the middle parts of our path section, and then we're going to come into settings and we're going to click flatten terrain. Now from here, you'll see it's going to try and flatten the terrain out. If I place this in, it will flatten it out to there. It looks awful, so we won't do that. But if we make our segment longer, so let's make it 2, and now it joins up nicely, and then we can click this. It's going to flatten out this little walkway going up to our plaza here. So it gives us a nice smooth sloping transition up to the top there. It's not too bad. It's not too bad, and it gives us a nice smooth transition, at least without messing around with that terrain stamp tool, which I think is always a bit of a win. Now here as well, just before we put our station in, I'm going to align this to the grid, and we're going to make, let's have square edges. We'll click that option there, and we're going to make a really large central plaza up here because our station is going to be off the back of this somewhere. So I think probably about that wide will do. That's pretty big, I'd say. Let's maybe go back one further this way, just so we can scope out what kind of size our main plaza is going to be here. And then we get this nice straight path flowing smoothly down the slope here and onwards back into our zoo. Okay, let's talk transport. Let's do it. So in facilities under transport rides, you get 5 different options of transport. Now we're going to be doing the small steam train today. I am also going to add in the 4x4 adventure tour around our African savannah safari area when we come to do that. But all of these essentially operate in the same way. You start off by placing a station. Obviously your gondola is huge, so bear that in mind. Yeah, this is going to flow over all of your paths and is quite suspended. So it operates slightly differently in that sense, but the principles of everything are exactly the same. The monorail you can treat the same as a train, for example. The riverboat as well, obviously you just want that to be on water somewhere, and it's exactly the same principles. So all of our transport rides have to operate in a loop, so you can't just have a station going to one station and then back on the same track again. It doesn't work like that. It has to be connected in a loop, so your track needs to come out of a station and join back into the other end of the station, and this goes for all transport rides, otherwise it just won't function. So the train needs to be able to leave from one end and come back into the other end, so bear that in mind when you're planning out your designs. And obviously I had a big plan for this zoo, so I knew where my train was going to go. I left this space and roughly where it wanted to flow. But it is quite a good idea to get them in relatively early if you've got the money for it, or if you're playing on sandbox at least, because you can always come and edit the track afterwards. But at least if you know where it's roughly going to go, then you can kind of design your habitats and things like that around it, which is always very useful. Now with the stations, same as any other building, you can raise or lower it if you hold shift on your keyboard. So you can move it around like that. Of course, if you hold Z as well, you can rotate it. So it's exactly the same, and you've got the angle snap options here too. So it's exactly the same as any other kind of building piece that you put in your game. Now, one important thing to note are these options here. So at the moment, we're placing a station with left entry and left exit. And left is the side, if you point forwards, the way the transport ride is going, left is obviously on the left-hand side of it there. So it's on the back of our screen if we angle it like this, where that blue box is. And I think you can see that on all of them. Yeah, the same blue box is there on all of the transport rides. So that's a kind of good indication of which side it is. So you want to kind of choose which options before you place this down is the easiest thing. You can amend it afterwards as well. So we're actually going to go for station with right entry and right exit. So this one. So you can have your entrances and exits on different sides, or you can have them on the same side. We're going to go for both on the right hand side. So the entrance into our station is going to be from this path here, and they'll flow directly into the station, and they'll also leave the transport ride from over here as well. So I'm going to place it in. I want to have a bit of space in front of it for a queue and an actual station building, which we will come on to, of course, as well. But I think we're going to place it in pretty parallel to this path, I think is probably the best option for this. So let's go here. We'll give ourselves a little bit of room round each side. Now here as well, you do have a couple of options when it comes to building your track. So you can add more station pieces if you want, again picking what side it is. So yeah, if I add an extra station piece, you'll see that just extended it. So we'll click on that, and then we'll click enter on our keyboard, or click build here, and that will build that. We can keep building the station out if we want to. I'm actually going to undo that because frankly for the little train and for our little zoo, we don't really need that. Like the default station platform that you put in is plenty big enough. And then here you're on utilities, and this is a standard track piece. So if we've come off it like we have here, if we're still within the editor, we can just click on this track piece here, and this will come on to, it's saying a station. Let's click on our track, there we go, and it will start to build out the track for us. So you can build directly across paths, which is kind of cool and actually pretty realistic, I'd say, for zoos. However, if you put your track down and then you try to put a path through it, you can't do that. So bear that in mind, you'll have to delete a piece of your track if you want a path through it, which was the main reason why I just laid down some of my main paths there before putting in my transport. So now here as well, when you lay your track, you've got various different options. So this length one here, if you just click it and drag it, you can change the length of the track piece that you're placing. So I am actually going to go for the shortest of 11 meters. It just gives us a little bit better control. Don't forget as well, angle snap still absolutely exists for this. And sometimes it's actually useful if you go terrain relative on the height markers, you can see that's 0 meters. So when you click on this one up or down, that's going to raise it. I think if we place it in now, yeah, it gives us a height marker of 1 meter here. So they're very useful if you're trying to bring it back down to ground level to know where you're at. So if we turn off angle snap as well, you'll get more freedom in terms of the angle that you can go. You see we're limited to 12 degrees here because the train won't actually go over that. And that's kind of a useful thing because you will want to test your ride once you've completed it. If you go up too much of a steep slope, sometimes it will struggle or go ridiculously slowly to get over that slope. So always worth testing it. And of course, you can't go beyond the limits anyway. And I probably wouldn't suggest always going up to 12 degrees if you're trying to get up a slope. Of course, we can go down as well. So I'll show you. If we do that, we're actually going underground, and for some reason it doesn't push the terrain around when you actually put it in, so you can get some interesting results that way. So be a little bit careful. That might be one of the options that I've got for terrain collision in Sandbox, but that's the easiest way to play, honestly. And it also means that you can terraform over your rail tracks once you put them in, which we'll show a little bit later. And then the side-to-side one is obviously your angle here. Again, if you've got angle snap off, you'll be able to freeform move it in the amount of curve that that transport ride can actually travel in. So you'll find that might be a little bit sharper for some of the other transport rides. For a train, it's pretty tricky to get around a tight corner. So that's why. So yeah, when we're ready to build, we can just hit enter on our keyboard and just keep going and then adjusting each track piece as we see fit. So we're just going to come straight across the path there. Then we're going to start to bend around this corner. And I am going to do this with angle snap off because I want to get the train up and over this hump around the back of our bison enclosure here, which could be tricky to do. So we're going to come to this point. I'm going to start to angle it towards there, and then we're going to start to go up just a little bit. So I'm going to go for, let's go for 4.93 degrees, so we know what that slope is. We come back down, angle slightly back down here, we can see how high we're going. And that's not too bad. That's not too bad. We want to curve it a little bit this way. So again, we're continuing to go up here because I haven't adjusted that back down. So it's still going up at that 4.93 degree angle. And now here, we can bring it back down to 0 so that we run flat along the top here. And let's just angle that a bit more so it's coming more into the area that we want. So we'll hit enter here. Now, this is an area the Bison won't be able to climb. They only need a 1.25 metre barrier, so this is all going to be a rocky cliff face. And the train is going to run along the back of the habitat here. We'll keep this running across the edge of the enclosure here. We'll go over a nice little bridge section, which is totally possible, and you get these really nice little supports here as well, which I do really enjoy. And you can turn those off as well by clicking the track support option down here, so you don't need to have track supports if you don't want them, if you just want a floating track, for example. If you have a habitat that you're just entering at ground level and the animals could literally escape via your track, you're going to want to use airlock gates. By way of example, if we wanted to put in a habitat here, which required, it was all just on one level and we need an airlock gate to stop the animals from escaping, we can come into barriers here, and there are 3 of them. So there's a track airlock, a wooden track airlock, and a glass track airlock. And these are what you're going to want. So if I actually just place this in a little bit further away, we should get a snapping option to go through it. So let's place that in here. We'll come out of that, pressing escape on our keyboard. We'll go back into edit track up here. Okay, so yeah, now we can see it. So I just need to come back actually a little bit further. And if you need to delete a track piece, just hit delete on your keyboard. So while you've got this green one here, if I hit delete, that's going to remove the track piece that we've already placed there. I'm just going to undo that. But yeah, here you can see this little symbol, and this is a sort of autocomplete symbol. So we're going to lock it into the gate like that. And then you can see it's nicely through it. It'll be functional with the air track lock gate here. And then we can just build our habitat barriers around it. And we'll want another gate, obviously, to exit out the other side. Now, I'm not going to do this here now because I simply don't know if I'm actually going to put an enclosure here or what it's going to be like. So we will wait and see for that. But the next thing we do want to do is bring it up over our embankment that we left for our seal habitat. So here, I'm going to try and aim it as best I can towards this. And again, some of this does just take a little bit of eye if you've left places like I have over here. But it is easy enough, especially when you've got that angle snap turned off, just to create some subtle, very small shifting angles in your track. And again, because we've got the path already down, we can just go straight over it like this. And you can see where that's now digging into the terrain. So what we do want to do is just come up a little bit here. So let's go up 6.7, yeah, like that. We'll bring it back down to ground height. And that is saying 0 meters on the terrain. It's not particularly close to our barrier, is it? So let's just try that again. So here I can tell I've got the right slope height because when I bring the train back to ground level, the sleepers are kind of resting on the ground, so I'm quite happy with that. And then we can move this right along the edge of our seal habitat here. We need a slight curvature because it's not perfectly straight, but that won't be noticeable at all on the train. So yeah, the train will run right alongside the seals here, so that'll give them a good view into the seal habitat for sure. And one of the most important things when you're designing your transport networks is, of course, to think about what animals they can actually see, because you'll make far more money and it'll be much more attractive to guests if you have some kind of animal entertainment along the way. Okay, so this, I can tell I've not come down enough. Again, it takes a little bit of trial and error, I think, to get this right. Let's come down 4.4 here, and then we'll see if we can level this off to ground level. That's not too bad. I think we could maybe go a little bit further. So on this one, instead of coming down we'll come down a little bit more. So we'll go 4.88. Build that. Angle this back up to 0. So we're running flat, and that's perfect coming across the path here. So now what I do want to do is just lay out a bit of fake track that we can imagine is going to go round the elephants that will probably be out here and up round one of the any other habitats that we have going up this hill. So we're just going to lay this out for now, and of course we'll come in and change this when we actually come to do these habitats later on. Okay, so here is where I want to add in another station. I realise we're definitely not coming in super parallel to our path network here, which would be useful for us to do. So let's just make sure we're getting a nice angle on this piece of track here, like that. And then if we go straight, we can convert back to station. So I'm going to do it on the right. No, so we want both of these on the left. So entry and exit on the left, so it'll open out into the main plaza here. And it just gives us the default size of station, which I'm fine with. That's what we've used down in our first station as well. So we'll just go for that. We'll click 720 to complete. These are not cheap to build, as you may have noticed. So do bear that in mind when you're coming to do this. Of course, we could add on extra station platform there if we want to. I'm just going to go for the default length. I would recommend with the gondolas and actually all of the other transport options that you make your stations a bit bigger than the default, because that only fits one car in it. So it's not ideal for those type of transport options where there's less people going on per ride, essentially. So yeah, what we're going to do now is just complete our train track loop back round to our other station. So from here, we might be able to see, we've got this autocomplete button here. If I click that, yeah, it's going to find us a path to autocomplete. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that, which is often the easiest way to get back into your station. If you leave too tight a corner, you won't be able to get back in. So you may have to backtrack along your track just to get it to actually work and function the way you want. So bear that in mind. But there we go, we have got a completed train loop in, which is incredibly bare, completely undecorated, and very uninteresting to our guests because there's no habitats along it. I will flash up on screen a couple of examples of a train route that I've done in another zoo that I just do for fun, where it has tons of viewing through different habitats, which is kind of cool. So there's a few little screenshots of that for you for ideas of what you might want to do in your zoo. Now this bit, where it's sunk into the terrain, what we can do now is just fix this. So I'm going to make a small brush size on a relatively low intensity. And I'm just going to push the terrain down until it's underneath our tracks and our tracks are visible there. So you kind of don't really have to worry too much about the terrain when you put your actual tracks in, because you can always come and manipulate the terrain afterwards. So like you could raise the train up to meet a raised bridge if you wanted to as well. Obviously this wouldn't apply to water tracks. You can't go uphill on water. Obviously it has to be continuous on a body of water. You can't come onto land with the boat tour. So do bear that in mind as well when you're designing it. I know that's fairly obvious, so it shouldn't need to be said, but I will just say it just in case. So just talking about paths, and like I mentioned before, if we create another path here, we can't then go over our track, annoyingly, even though the track will go absolutely fine over the path. So how you have to do that is you have to delete a piece of the track. So if we come and click on the track here, you'll see you'll get your information. We've got 2 stations, one's unpowered, great, we'll need to fix that. And then if we come into edit track here, it will send us straight back to the start of our ride. If we come in here and we click on this piece of track and then click delete on your keyboard, that's going to get rid of that. So then you can come back into paths, you can draw your path in wherever you want it, like this, and then escape from that, come back into here, edit track, and then we can actually just click autocomplete here. Oh no, we can't. Track limits exceeded? Well, we just built that. Yeah, so you may get some odd errors like this, but there we go. Hopefully now, yes, we can click it in and finish it, and that's gone in absolutely fine over the path. Guests will have no problem walking over this, I would add as well. So if we just come back to the start of the zoo, let's click play. You'll see they'll just walk over the tracks like this. What can be a nice idea actually is to raise the terrain up so they don't have the sleepers to walk over here as well, which is something we could do. It would mean deleting out this entire path network though, so I'm not overly in favour of that. What I could do is just sync this track a little bit more if we edited the track here. So let's come back into edit track. Let's click on this piece of track and we'll hit delete. It'll take us back to that side. If we actually want to operate on this side, we'll just click this piece of track here. And I'm actually going to hit delete again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to sync it down the tiniest little bit. So just something like even 0.74 would probably do it. And then if we bring it back up to terrain height here, you'll see a lot of those sleepers are gone and we're just seeing the track. So that's kind of, it's not perfect because it's obviously overlapping at either end. In fact, actually, we probably do want to fix that. Let's come back here, click on this piece of track, hit delete. And then we'll come back to this piece of track. We'll continue this on, yeah, flat to the ground here. And then we can also complete that this side. And then they don't have, apart from this tiny, tiny section there, they don't have sleepers to walk over, which is kind of a nicer way to actually put your tracks, I think, over paths sometimes. It's less for them to trip up on. You may want to do some little designs like mind your step or something like that for those. But it all works absolutely fine. Okay, so this station is unpowered, which we do need to fix. So I'm just going to plop in a really ugly, because we're not going to work on this plaza, or this station actually indeed today. We're just going to plop in a really ugly transformer up here somewhere. And we'll just connect it in quickly, just so that we have got power to this station here. And that'll do for the moment. So if you've got your track laid out and you've got whatever stations you want, again, you can just have one station, because the whole point of these really is that guests would come on them and see animals. So don't forget that. It's really important that they actually see some animals. Of course, if you're in Sandbox, you could design it so that it's a scenic view, for example, as it might be maybe round a lake or something like that. But really, they want to see animals, whatever they're doing. Or again, like I mentioned, you could use it actually as a transport option if you've got a segregated part of your zoo that they can't walk to via paths. That's another option, of course. But yeah, the attraction is animals. So make sure you've got animals along your track and you've got good viewing paths for them. So like here, for example, our train is running along the back of the habitat, so it'll get a really good view down into the habitat here, but it's not going to interrupt the guest viewing, which will be from this side. So it's kind of out of the way. So you want to make sure you've got good guest viewing and good train viewing for all of your habitats that run alongside your transport network. So yeah, what now? We've got these two stations. Let's go to this station for starters. I'm actually going to rename it as Entrance Station. And we have some requirements that we need to meet. So there's place or move entrance to start off with. Now you need a queue path for this, so bear that in mind. And obviously the longer the queue, the more guests will be able to wait for your ride. So that's also something to consider. You'll see there's little snap points, which are essentially on the grid of the station. It's quite useful to use these if you want to make a nice fancy station design. So I would recommend considering that. I'm going to put the entrance at this end. And then I'm also going to place the exit via this button, which will be right down on this end of our platform. So let's actually go one step in. If we want to move it, you can just click on that button again and then we'll be able to move it. So let's just move that one step over so it's nicely balanced there. And then we also need to connect the entrance to the path. Interestingly, not the exit. So for this, you need a queue path that you can see here. So you can select different types of these again if you want to. I'm just going to select the brick one, I think, for this. You'll see it does change the pattern on the side of your station, and you can also hover over the other side to change the other side's pattern too, which is kind of useful. I think we might go for the brick for the moment. We may change this afterwards. But then queues operate in exactly the same way as paths. You'll notice they can go much smaller though, so they can go down to a 2-meter width, which is kind of handy, honestly, if you want to fit in quite a big queue, and also make it a little bit more realistic. Although this, of course, is 4 width, so bear that in mind as you're coming out of here. Now, the stations are all slightly raised to different degrees, depending on what transport option you're going for. So we've got angle snap on. You will need to come back down to ground level. So let's just do that here. And then what we're going to do is create terrain modification. Oh, we still got flattened terrain on. There we go. So yeah, we're going to come down to here and we're going to create quite a long, windy little queue here. Now I've chosen to not have the railings on the queue barrier. That's just the option that I've gone for here, but you can select otherwise if you want to. So we'll leave the queue like that for the moment. And then in terms of path, what I'm actually going to do before I start anything else is let's go to start building on station grid. And then if we select a wall, you'll see it's snapping now to the grid of the station. So you can build perfectly around it, which is super useful. So what I am actually just going to do quickly is place in some facilities. So I'm just going to mark this actually with a wall here. We then come into facilities and go to guest facilities. We're still in the same group, so we know we're on the grid of the station. I am going to add in a couple of little shops. So I feel like an information point would probably be quite important for in here. So let's go for that. Now you'll see this as well is on the same level as the station, which can be somewhat annoying. So we'll want to come into here and change the grid height down to 0 so that we can get this nice and flat on the ground. So you can see that path is now nice and level with our path outside. I think if we change the grid size to 1 meter as well, and then we'll just leave a little 1 meter gap in between our building and that pathway there, then we know we're snapped onto this grid really nicely. So I'm going to place in a couple of these buildings. I think we'll go for an information stand there. I'm actually going to delete this one, having just put that in. And then we're also going to choose a merchandise because we haven't got any shops in here at the moment at all. Now you can of course go for the big souvenir shops if you want to at the moment. I've had nothing but trouble from them, honestly. Like guests get stuck and get trapped all the time in mine, which is quite annoying to say the least. So I'm actually going to avoid that for now. We're just going to put in just a memento, I think, in here. And then I'm also going to actually add in a toilet, which I feel like would be quite an appropriate thing for a station to have. So again, we'll make sure we're on this grid. I'm going to turn it round to the side slightly here. Just seeing where our exit path's coming out. Yeah, we can leave that here. So now we know that that's all on the station grid. What we can then do is come into paths. So I'm just going to go for asphalt because I think I'm going to cover this entire station in a flooring, just so it looks nice. We're going to place that in, and then let's go to align grid. And then we can start to build out a massive station forecourt, essentially. I'm actually going to delete out this path here so we can continue the grid there. Then let's come away from our grid. Make sure our toilet is hooked in here. I really want to move that staff member. Let's just press play. And they've gone anyway. Wonderful. So we'll come back into paths. That is obstructed for some reason. That's super, super weird. So we've got that piece of path in. Let's just go back into this group. We'll enter group edit mode and then see if we can get our toilets back in here. So they kept saying they're obstructed, so I've actually exited that group and I'm just going to place the toilets in manually and hope that we might be alright there. So we'll see how that goes. And then we want to connect this in, so let's have a couple of entrances into our station. Again, trying to align to the grid of the station here, which kind of aligns to our path grid. So we'll go something like that, which will bring them into the station building. Then with our queue, we do also want to connect this in, and that comes with a nice little end there, so you can very notably and very obviously see where that queue starts, and then they'll come around here and obviously queue round the back. Lots of detailing still to be put in. And then we do want to hook up our exit, so we're just going to do a nice simple ramp for that. And we might go for a little wood texture, I think, there. So that is now, if we click on our station, it's just closed. There's no problems anymore. It could potentially be opened now. You can see your scenery rating here is absolutely appalling because we haven't put any building items on it, but that is why start building on the station grid is quite important, because then you will add more and more scenery rating to it, which will make it more attractive to guests as well. We've then got various different options in the load rules here. Now, one thing I would like to do is say don't block station. So basically, if we have 2 trains running around our track, because it is quite long, after all, we've got here, if one train comes in and it's sitting there waiting till the max time to pick up more people, the other train will just sit outside the station and not be able to get in. So we want to do don't block station for this. And departure interval, I mean, yeah, you can leave these on the default and I think that's generally okay. In terms of rider load, if your ride isn't particularly attractive like mine isn't now, let's go for, well, we'll leave it on half for the moment and see how we do, but we might want to lower that just so the trains keep going round the track and don't sit in the station for a really long time. And then you can check on your maintenance here as well for each of your stations. If we come out of that, let's just click on the train again. You can see we've got issues on this one. We can't open this station because we need to hook up the paths and the queue as well. So let's go ahead and do that very quickly. So we're hooked in here. We're also going to say don't block station here as well. And then we can open this station. We're going to call this plaza station, just so we know obviously which one's which. Of course we'll come back to that station when we come on to do the plaza. It's not going to stay like that, do not worry. So now let's come back in, click on a ride. Let's open this station as well. So it's actually ready to go. So actually, before we close it, you can also test it. So if we click play here, it will test by the train going around the track to make sure you can go up and down all of your different bumps and the track is actually complete and functional. So that's a good thing to do. That's probably more the case in Planet Coaster. Nothing tends to go too wrong in Planet Zoo as long as your track's all connected. It tends to be alright, and they can make it up the slopes because you've got that kind of maximum there. But actually, before we test it, let's close it again, because here what we can do is, so this is in the train, not the station specific, but in the main train ride element. We can say number of vehicles. I'm going to say 2. And you'll see another train has appeared at the other station. And also, because we've got extra room on the platform, I'm actually going to say 7 cars per train as well, because then that will fill up the platform pretty nicely for each train. We can also come in here and customize our ride, so you can change like the seat colours if you want. You can change the trim colour, the body colour, well, the 2 different body colours. So let's should we have a nice little yellow train? I'm quite liking the yellow and black. Maybe with some brown seats. I'm quite liking that, so let's go for that. And then we can either test it if we want to, but it'll be fine. So let's open it. And here we can change the ticket price as well. I'd kind of always put it up to like $2.50. You should be fine with that, even with hardly any animals. So we'll put it up to that and see what happens, but we may need to adjust that. I don't think this is going to do too well right now because all they can see is the seals, like I said, but we will add in I will add in the bison enclosure with all of the detailing later on, so be able to see that, but it's not really the focus of this episode. So there we go. We could also change the max speed as well if we wanted to. If we wanted it to run a little bit quicker around the track, we could do that. Don't know how far. You can go to 30 miles per hour, which seemed maybe a little bit extreme. So I think we'll just leave it on the default of 10 for the time being. But you could go even slower if you want people to have longer to take in those animals. But a couple of other things I like to do in the stations is also include things like ATMs, which can kind of look like ticket machines, I think. So I think what we're going to do here is actually have a little wall of ATMs along here. Maybe just 3 of them like that can act as ticket machines. We can then also make it feel a little bit more station-like by adding in things like benches as well. So let's maybe we'll have a different bench in the station actually. Maybe some of these? So yeah, then we can have some benches inside in our station. And this is the beauty of doing a path grid like this, is that the guests can walk anywhere they want to. So we could create like a big station waiting area essentially in here. Could of course put food and drink and then put some picnic benches as well if you wanted to, but I think for this they've got a massive food and drinks court right over there, so I think we'll leave it here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and build out our station building. Of course, the key thing being that we make sure we go to our station and we start building on the station grid, because that's going to make it a hell of a lot easier. so we have our station in, and this episode is already so long. I have cut out a little bit of the finer details, but we'll go through it all now. So in terms of the actual station design, I wanted to keep it consistent with what we've got in the rest of our zoo, because I think having some consistency, particularly when we don't have any themed areas in it at the moment at least, is quite important. So we've gone for our metal plank wall and our wood trim kind of extra adding to it throughout the main body of the building, but then we've also paired it actually with these modern glass walls, which I think makes quite a nice kind of contrast and makes the building stand out. And then we've of course used our old familiar concrete flat roof across most of it. Plus we go up a nice little slopey roof to go over the train track element itself over here. Now I did decide to actually raise up this section of the roof because when I was looking at it, I was like, there's loads of steam coming out of our steam train. I just think it would be a health and safety hazard to not have some ventilation at the top there, so that's what we've gone for there. Yeah, if we come back around to the main entrance, we still need to do some detailing, of course, outside here. So I think what I will do is add some mulch patches. And of course, just a little reminder, if we go into nature, we go to gardening, you can find all of the mulch patches in here. So these are just great for adding little flower beds and that sort of thing. Use them in exactly the same way as building pieces. So use X to control it more finely or move it around the surface. So yeah, having this floor in place across everything is brilliant because then you don't see those nasty edges amongst the path. There was a little patch of green, for example, here that was sticking out, so you can't see that now with this floor in place. We've got so many people coming in and out of it, actually. The train is proving relatively popular at the moment, which is quite good. Yeah, we just added on this little kind of nice signage over here, so just some of the animals. I'm thinking they'll probably have a black rhino along the route as well. We've definitely got the seal, and that's the wildebeest around the globe because you're getting transported around the park. That's what I was going for there. I think one of my finest things is this little ticket booth over here. Now this is just made up of simple wall pieces behind it using some panels to block off these ATMs here. So if I actually just, let's go back into the UI, let's just delete those. You can see they're just panels placed at a slight angle to cover that up. So that's all that is there. We've got a wall frontage, and then to cover the top of that we've just got panels along the top. But I think it sits in pretty nicely. It's quite basic, but just adds such a nice little feature to our station. Adds that little bit of extra realism. Of course we've got our shops there. If we come round to the toilets as well, I've actually decided to hide the entrance behind these doors. So these people are walking through a wall right here. Like if you go in, it is literally a blocked off wall. In fact, I should actually decorate the interior, really, shouldn't I? And I should put floor in here as well. You can see the bit of green there. That's a significant failing of mine in this case. Yeah, I haven't decorated any of it. We'll finish that off. However, I think the entrance to the toilets looks quite good. You've got ladies and men, even though they don't care. They're just going to walk straight through the wall. And then to detail around it, we've added in some lamp posts as well, and also these raised planters in the corner. So just wall pieces here, a mulch piece. Oh, if I come into this, you can see there's a mulch piece in the middle there with some flowers on top. And that just fills in that kind of dead, empty space really quite nicely, I think, in that corner. And we have also done the same the other side. So if we come around here to the queue entrance, we've done a nice big planter over here, actually with some bigger trees in to sort of cover up some of that nastiness as you go towards the station. And we've also got, of course, because it's a road, maybe it could be a train track here, but a conservation board to add a little bit of education and something else in place here. And then with the queue, so instead of using the barriers on the queue, I did use just these ordinary fence pieces to highlight where that is. So I think that sits in pretty nicely. And then of course we've got our train there with the windows out. Again, lots more detailing. We need to move this horrendous, awful, I mean, this is terrible ATM unit here. Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking when I made those. I just tried to put in some ATMs very quickly and it didn't work. But that's the beauty of Planet Zoo. Don't be afraid to try things and then realise that it's awful afterwards. That's absolutely okay. Yeah, I really like how this little sort of window sits, so you can, from the path, you can kind of see into the station there. Quite pleased with that, particularly with our theming coming in all over this building with the metal plank walls and the wood trim added onto it. So yeah, very pleased with that. Also got a couple of little animals here as well, just to decorate that up a little more. I don't use these animal signs enough, I don't think, so I think they look quite pretty in there. But that's our station. Also, in terms of the actual sign out the front here, you'll see I've used lettering. And then what I did is use Control X to duplicate them, moved them down and over very slightly and changed it to black so that we've got this kind of black border on it. Maybe see a little better if we click off whatever is selected there. Which I think is quite nice. Adds that little extra touch to just those plain letterings, so that's quite a nice idea to use there. And I will come through and add some trim to our pathway, which we've done elsewhere in the zoo, like the little rocks or some blocks or wooden posts or something around the path with some flower beds in the middle. I think would be nice here to finish this off. So I'll show you that at the end. But for now, we're going to turn our attention to the bison habitat. Now I'm actually not going to show you this habitat build simply because the focus of this episode is transport and it's already taken a long time to get through all of that and the station build as well. But what I am going to do is talk you through how to get this layered water effect that I'm planning on putting in here, and you can see the train running across the top. It's that view is going to be awesome once this habitat is finished. Okay, so what I want from this is I want a really tall waterfall in this little back section up here, which kind of comes down right next to the train track and flows into a waterfall underneath it, and then another waterfall which flows down into a lower section of water here. So in order to achieve that, obviously when you place water it all goes in at one height, so if we did that, I think yeah, it's going to pretty much fill the entire area with one height of water. So yeah, let's undo that because that's not the effect that we want. You need to have some kind of barrier in place here in order to separate two water pools, as it were, to get different heights. So even if I did it low here, I can't then do it high there. It's just not going to work. So in order to do that, you could of course shape the terrain and pull that across so you've got a terrain barrier there which will keep the water in. Or the other way is just to use a small section of one of your habitat barriers to cover it off. And the one that I like to use is just the glass barrier because the poles on it are nice and thin and the glass itself is nice and thin, so it's very easy to cover up. Now the important thing with this is you could just draw in a barrier across here. It's probably not going to like it here because the terrain is too bumpy. So let's, can we use an example back here? So something like that. You could draw it in one side to the other side of your water. Then if you click on the barrier, you can just lower it, but you can't lower it any lower than this height. So it's not particularly ideal because that's going to be really, really obvious when you've got one pool of water here and the other on this side that you've got a barrier in the middle. So in order to hide it away, let's undo all of that. We want to place it kind of in the middle here. Now, of course, we could do that just with a very small 2 metre section of barrier, or we could even go to 3 metres, can we? We could maybe squeeze in a 3 metre here. Yes, we can, like that. And then with this one, we can raise and lower the height as we see fit. So we could raise it really quite low at this point. Now the trouble is the water can still escape, I think, from some of these parts. You can test that by adding in the water here. Okay, it does actually keep it in. We can't go any higher than that though, because the water will escape through the sides here. So I do want to go a little bit higher on the water level than what we're seeing there. So what we can do now is grab our terrain tools and sculpting. And we're just going to grab pull. And I'm going to kind of check the height of this barrier because I think it is just about high enough. In fact, we may actually, let's just click edit barrier. We'll make it a tiny bit taller, like that. And then we'll go back into terrain tools. We're going to get our pull function. We're going to lower the intensity right down on this, just so we're doing gentle, small little pulls here. And we're going to fill out the terrain up in and around this barrier so that we haven't got those gaps there. So something more akin to that. It's not perfect, it needs a bit of tidying up. So now, if we try and put in the water there, we're still coming in relatively low level. I think the next step up is just a bit obstructive, so what we probably want to do is actually lower these sides down a little bit so it's a little bit more pleasing to the eye. But now what we can do, of course, is come in and put in our water source down here, which is nicely at a different level to this one. So I will tidy this all up off camera, but just so you get the principle of this. Now with this barrier we can now lower it right down to that water level right there, which is super handy indeed. And then if we remove this water pool, now that we know that it goes in there with that height, we can then just tidy up some of these edges. So we'll push down our edges here so it's a little bit of a smoother bank into our pool of water at the top here. Push these back just a little bit. We could even grab flattened terrain and just lower these levels down right by our water edge over here with something more like that. Then if we put back in our water, Oh, now that is escaping through the barrier somehow. I'm not entirely sure where, so let's actually just grab our barrier again. We'll edit it, pull it up just that little bit more for the moment. Then when we add in our water, yes, it keeps it in there. And then what we can do is go back into edit barrier and lower this right down to the smallest level like that. And then we can come back in and add our water in here, which gives us that lovely multi-water level approach. And one of the easiest ways to cover that up is with one of the aquatic pack waterfalls here. So you will need the aquatic DLC for this. If we come in and put this in, what we can do is kind of get it pretty much to a level where it looks like it's flowing from one water level to the other. So we can go down just a tiny bit here, something like that. Let's click play. And yeah, there we go. We've got a little bit of covering up to do. So what I like to do here is actually add in a little bridge of some description over the top and maybe some more rocks around the edge, which will cover that up. But one other thing you could do, of course, is use some of the waterfall effects that we have in here. So you could start to, not sure what direction this one is now. So we could start to kind of place that almost on top of that barrier here. We definitely need a few rocks and things like that around it, but it can definitely help to have these effects on it. And I think, like I said, a little bridge or something around this to take the attention away from the barrier is what is needed here. So you'll see that in the finished result, but there you go. That's how you can get simple multi-level water effects. So if you want a river flowing down a hill, you can do lots of small little bits like this with a few rocks covering up your barrier in between. And you'll get really nice kind of river flowy style builds. So I will snap my fingers now and we'll have the finished habitat ready. There's just not enough time to add it in, like I said. But within the next couple of days, I'll make the time-lapse available to members and patrons so that if you want to see it, you can. But like I said, everything we do in this habitat, we will be covering in future episodes, so you're not going to miss anything. So let's see the finished result. Okay, so here we have the finished bison habitat. I decided to use this really nice little bison sculpture piece of artwork by our Bison Valley sign, which is just very simply a Arctic wall arch combined with one of our signs with some lettering on it. So yeah, quite nice there. Really like the custom fence that we've got here, which is just a mesh panel piece with some of these Australian, I think they're Australian wooden posts, and then the Arctic wall again around it. So mixing lots of different themes here. And I think it kind of works for that rustic look. And I really like how this habitat has lots of different kind of viewpoints to it. So you've obviously got the little house over here where they come if they want to sleep, which is also layered inside, which I quite like. The bisons can easily climb up one step like that. And also behind some one-way glass wall panels here as well to give them a little bit of privacy if they do want somewhere to hide, although they're not particularly shy animals at all. And I would also add another little trick is the education boards. They're absolutely freaking huge and sometimes they're just not going to work particularly nicely in an area like this. So what I've actually done is put in the education board. If I show you this, let's click X, we can raise it up. It's all like tuned into the bisons and I've just hidden it away under the floor and it still works. So it's still giving them education, and then we can just use one of the 1 meter TV screens here to add our bison information to, which you can just do when you select on it. If you just go to wide and then whatever animal you are wanting to look at, and then it looks like we've got the education board here instead of actually having it the giant screen plastered all over our walls. So yeah, I really like this little custom fence. You can walk around, the bisons can come really close up to the fence here, so that's quite kind of intricate. And then we come around here, I've done the same thing with all of the education boards hidden under the path the entire way around, except for one actually, which we've got slightly further on. But we come around and then we've got obviously the protection of the water here, so the bison can't climb up, and you get a really nice kind of view down into the habitat. Lots of different layers here with the 2 different layers of water that we talked about, now added in the waterfalls as well to separate them. So that's quite a nice thing to do. We've got a big seating area here in the middle. All of this is raised path as well, so that's kind of covering up, like if I come in and show you here, we'll delete this. Yeah, some nasty terrain work underneath. And this wall is not perfect. It was quite tricky to get it around these bends, but I think it kind of adds, you could say, some extra detail, maybe. I don't know. It's not, it's just definitely not perfect. Needs a little bit of work, that wall. But I really love the effect of mixing in different styles of rocks here. So we've got some of the faux rocks from the aquatic pack recoloured to their grey. Then we've got some of our temperate rocks mixed in there too. And also some of the dead fake rock trees as well, mixed in a few different places. So it kind of all comes together to create quite a dynamic environment. And what I was really envisaging for this was these kind of big mountainous hills behind some bison that you might see when you look at a Google Earth image. That's what I was trying to get here. But the tricky thing with bison is they don't actually like much plant coverage, so we can't really add in lots of our long grass. So I've sort of relied on the long grass texture painter for a lot of this, but it doesn't quite have the same effect. That's the beauty of Sandbox. If you turn off their welfare requirements from a habitat, plant and foliage point of view, then it doesn't really matter and you can place grass into your heart's content. But there we go. Yeah, nice and hidden away. Really, really like these rock walls. And actually just increasing the height very slightly of the ground out here creates a really nice dynamicism, I think. And here as well, if we come along the main path, it's also hidden behind the slight embankment in the middle here, which I'm really enjoying. Just adds a little nice extra natural effect to your zoo there. So yeah, this is the habitat. We've got the keeper gate hidden away at the back over here, so it's not super visible to the guests. And then of course we've got the train track running across the top, so they get really decent views down into the bison habitat. Here with our layered waterfalls works so nicely. So that piece of glass barrier is just hidden with this waterfall over it and a little bit of rock just to cover up the edge of it. But you can't really super see it, particularly when we've put this bridge for the keeper access across the top here. So yeah, really loving how this has come out, particularly when you're on the train and you're going pretty much underneath this waterfall. Yeah, so there we go. That is the bison habitat, and I think that's the main elements that I really wanted to speak about there. Yeah, we're going to go over how to kind of design some of these larger animal habitats, especially when they don't want much foliage. It can be pretty tricky, so putting in interesting things like this feature wall at the back, having these layers of height flowing around your habitat as well, and lots of rock work, which is the obvious thing you can do. Oh, here comes the train. Of course, when you're not allowed foliage is, yeah, very helpful, I think, to design these areas. And we will cover that more in future episodes, particularly as we're probably coming on to some of the larger animals now than we have done so far in the zoo. Yeah, look at that train. Wonderful. And it's actually really quite busy. If we actually just pause a second, we'll have a look at the train. We come into overview. Species seen last year, of course, only the bison and the great seal. But everyone wants to go on it. They're saying it's really good value as well. I did actually increase the ride ticket to $3.50 and they're still saying it's good value, even with only 2 animals. So you can really make quite a lot of money from these, I think. And actually it's so popular that the queue is full. So we may even need a longer queue perhaps for our train station than what I've actually put in. But yeah, there we go. That's the bison habitat sitting really nicely over here. Lots of detailing work still needed around it, but I think for now that's pretty good. And if we come back to our station, I've just spruced up the outside of it here. Little bit of, this is the aquatic faux rock block that I've just sunk into the ground a little bit to give a nice edge to our pathway here. Just some long grass and a couple of bushes there, nothing more needed. And then some more nicely designed flower beds as we mentioned out the front. Of course, a couple of benches and that sort of thing. So don't forget, if you're missing any of the planetzoo DLCs, or if you do want to pick up the console edition, which launches on the 26th of March, which is next week as I'm recording this, please do check out my instant gaming link in the description below. They do have some pretty big discounts versus Steam prices for all of those DLCs, so you can pick them up for a really good value, and it does also help to support the channel. And please let me know in the comments what you would like to see in future episodes. I'd love to take your suggestions, so please let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, likes, comments and shares are always greatly appreciated. But that is all from me for now. So while you wait for new content, please do check out one of the videos on screen. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next episode. Bye bye!